Hey, it's Pane here. Welcome to episode 115 of Insights. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you're doing well as we are on the verge of literally, well, we're in April already, which is just incredible. Anyway, so here we go. Today I've got a lot to cover. I want to share with you something that's really, really crucial when it comes to our own psychology and philosophy and how we experience everything in life. And that is, we're going to be exploring deeply a brand new model that I've created, that I've added to my emotional fitness formula, which is the 5 levels of uncertainty that we all need to navigate. You know, life, there's a macro pattern for all of us in life. And that is, have you noticed that life will continually give us a new set of problems that we need to solve? Whether it's a new set of problems that you've unveiled because of a new business that you've started, or the next level that you're taking your business, or it could be that you're recently engaged in a new relationship, or you've moved country, or whatever it is that you're experiencing, is that over the long term and even in the short term, life continually gives us new sets of problems that we need to solve. The biggest problem that we could have with our thinking is to think that we're not meant to have any problems. The problems themselves help us create and shape us to the sort of person that we need to become to handle the next level. Does that make sense? Imagine playing a game. I'm not a gamer, but imagine playing a game where level 1 is exactly the same as level 25. I mean, how boring would it be? You know? So expansion and growth is everything. And as you can appreciate, here we are, as of the time of this recording in 2026, the 2010 model of you could not possibly handle the life that you have in 2026. That's what I've found universally across all the different workshops I've run with organizations and businesses recently and over the last 20 years, is that whenever I ask that question, could the 2010 or the 2005 or whatever the year is, 2008 version of you, navigate and handle the responsibilities of 2026, I universally get hands up saying, no, heck no, couldn't do it. So we've had to have become the 2026 version of us. Now, for us to handle the future, whatever the future is, in 2027 and beyond, we need to become that version in order to navigate and handle that. Now, what sits at the core of that, what determines massively how effectively and how well and how efficiently we solve these problems is determined by our emotional fitness. Because in order to navigate a true problem, is we need to navigate something that's unknown, something that's unfamiliar, something that perhaps doesn't even have any previous reference points. It involves us embracing uncertainty. And of course, emotional fitness is measured by the quality of our relationship with uncertainty. And what I want to do now is I want to dive deep into sharing with you the 5 different levels of uncertainty and how this particular model that I've created will boost significantly your level of emotional fitness, which will boost your effectiveness on how to navigate, solve, and transcend the problems that you're facing right now so you can get to the next level. Does that make sense? To solve a particular problem is not to solve it so we've got no more problems. It's to solve it so we become more to solve the next problem. And that's how life is for the rest of our time. Have you noticed that when life ceases to have problems, like when someone retires at whatever age and stops working and stops being an active member of the community and just becomes sedentary, have you noticed how quickly death comes knocking to people in that situation? Do you get that? We need the system. Our bodies are a system. Our mind is a system. Everything is a system. And the system can only become stronger under duress, under testing moments, under unfamiliar circumstances, under pressure. You know, this morning, one of my favorite rituals to do now, 2-3 times a week, is I do what's called cold hot therapy. It's cold bath, hot bath. You know, it's a particular protocol that I follow. And I love it because it puts my body under duress, which means it strengthens my immune system, which strengthens my body's ability to handle any other contagions that come in my environment. Does that make sense? So it's the same with our minds. It's the same with our relationships. It's the same in our businesses. It's the same with everything. Hence, our relationship with uncertainty matters more than anything else. I'm talking outside of our relationship with people. I'm talking about psychological relationships with different belief systems and thought systems. The single most important one has to be our connection to uncertainty and how we relate to it, what we make it mean, and what interpretations we've had of our historical experiences with it. So let's dive in. The 5 levels. So you can look at this in one of 2 ways, this model. You can look at it in terms of levels, or you can look at it in terms of categories of uncertainty, or you can look at it from the metaphor of the pool. So we're going to start at this very shallow end of the swimming pool, because the first category or level of uncertainty that we need to have in our life is a fun one. It's called variety. Variety, as we know, what's that cliche? Variety is the spice of life. We need variety in our lives, whether it's in the form of doing something different every day, or it could be, one of the highest quality levels of variety is having the ability to laugh, because laughter, fun, is a version or a flavor of spontaneity. Any form of spontaneity or giggle or fun or laughter is variety, the need for variety, the flavor of uncertainty called variety, that we get to meet in a very beautiful way. Have you noticed how serious we can become when we haven't laughed or smiled for some time? Like life becomes heavy. So variety also can be something really simple, like having something for dinner that you haven't had before, or variety could be just going on a holiday somewhere you haven't been before. You can imagine it's pretty simple. It's a very basic, fun way that we can meet our need for uncertainty. So variety is something that is at our doorstep at any given moment, because we can take a different road, literally, to get to the office, for example. We can take a different mode of transport to get to wherever we're going that day. I mean, there's all kinds of options begging at our doorstep for us to embrace when it comes to variety. Now, this is the first level, which is pretty basic. The second level, which goes deeper, or a higher level of uncertainty, is adventure. So adventure is something a little bit bigger. Adventure might be, an example of that might be traveling to a non-English speaking country that you've never been to before, and it's a brand new, unfamiliar culture that you want to immerse in for a few weeks or maybe a couple of months, whatever it might be. Adventure might be going off and trying something different in terms of a form of exercise or the way that you move your body. We can become adventurous in our conversations with the people that we love and broach topics that are risky or fun or out of the box or challenging. That's adventure. So adventure can be psychological in the form of our conversations that we have, all the way through to physical things that we do with our bodies, all the way through to geographical things and a whole host of other ranges in between. So adventure is the next level of uncertainty. Then it starts to become difficult. The difficulty level gets harder and harder as we go up these levels. The next level from there is challenge. Now, a challenge is where we experience difficulty. Now, for those of you writing notes, a challenge, that level of uncertainty, is where we become a conscious inviter of uncertainty into our lives. So pretty much these first three levels, variety, adventure, and challenge, is where we've consciously invited uncertainty into our lives. Now, the variety part is pretty simple and basic and not challenging at all. It's just a bit of fun. Adventure is fascinating and enticing and also fun, but a deeper level of fun than variety. Challenge is where things become a little bit more serious. And by serious, I don't mean serious in an egotistical way. I mean more focused. So right now, as of the time of this recording, I'm 4 weeks into training for a marathon, a 42.2 kilometer road run, which I've done many before. But every one of these marathons is different. And you have to put your body through certain levels of duress built over 16 weeks so we can handle the pace of which I want to run 42 kilometers at. And what's really funny about this, well, not funny as in ha-ha, but funny as in strange, is that even though I've done this 8 times before, every time it's difficult for different reasons. It's hard to imagine running 42 kilometers in a race when you haven't done it for a while or never done it before. Like, it's just completely unfamiliar territory. Anyway, there's a whole story and stories I have around running that I can't fit into this talk here today, into this podcast today. But the point I want to make is that when was the last time you invited a serious challenge into your life? Now, the challenge doesn't have to be physical. For a lot of us, it is. I actually think physical challenges are very, very, very healthy. Yes, obviously for our bodies, but very healthy for our mind and very healthy for our psychology, and even more healthier for our spirit. I still remember 2017 was my personal best marathon, and I remember going through some kind of energetical, spiritual shift when I completed that particular race. I couldn't tell you what it was. I couldn't even diarize or journal what it is that I actually experienced, other than I knew that something within me had shifted. I knew that specific event had boosted my growth and my capacity to handle more in life because of that one race. as I said, I couldn't write down exactly the list of things, but I know that something had shifted within me. Have you had that experience before where you've been challenged so much, but you know that on the other side of that challenge, you've changed, you've evolved. You can't necessarily put your finger on it or even write the words of what it actually means or how it's actually evolved and changed, but you know that you've changed. And more specifically, your capacity to handle the unknown has expanded. So challenge. Now, this is a pivotal door when it comes to these 5 levels or pivotal swing or whatever the metaphor is, that separates the first 3 levels of uncertainty are quite different to level 4 and level 5. Because level 4 and level 5, as you'll see in a moment, is what life brings to our doorstep. But challenge, adventure, and variety, life does not bring that to us. We go to it and bring it into our lives. Does that make sense? Now, let me tell you that one of the most crucial points of this particular conversation in this particular episode is your capacity to decide to consciously invite challenge into your life will save you so much unnecessary pain in your life. Because as you'll see when we get to level 4 and level 5 in a moment, is that level 4 and level 5 are not the types of uncertainty that any of us want to have in our lives. But many people have it in their lives. And I've got a philosophy on why that is, and I'll share that with you in a moment. But challenge. So when was the last time? This is the question I was just asking a moment ago, is when was the last time you consciously invited challenge into your life? Now, by challenge, I mean something that is hard, something that expands you, something that makes you breathe like that, something that makes you wonder whether you're enough to get through that particular challenge. Does that make sense? So you might be saying, well, Joe, you've done a marathon before, so of course you know you're going to do it. Well, after I've done a few marathons, it's not a matter of whether I can run the 42Ks, it's a matter of whether I can run it in a certain time. And that is just as scarily challenging as trying to run one for the first time. I hope that makes sense. It certainly makes sense to me anyway. So that's the 3rd level, and I'm going to trace back to that in a moment. The 4th level is problems, the nature of problems. So a problem. Now, let me define a problem here. A problem, a genuine problem, is when one of the big 3 in life gets hit. And what I mean by the big 3 is money, relationships, and health. Money, relationships, and health. If any of these 3 areas of our life is taking a significant hit, we have a real problem, as in a genuine problem. So if we've got a health problem in the form of a disease, that's a problem that needs to be prioritized and navigated and do everything we can within the realm of our resources to overcome. If we've got a money problem, then that money problem needs to be navigated. We need to, again, find all the resources we can to navigate and overcome that money problem. It becomes a priority. Any kind of problem becomes a priority. A relationship problem where someone that we deeply care about or cared about or love, and that relationship has come across rough times. We need to prioritize that particular problem in order to fix up the rest of our lives, if that makes sense. Now, here's the thing. There's 2 things with problems. So if you've got something that you call a problem, but your health is fine, your relationships are anywhere from okay to great, and money's okay. And what I mean by money being okay is that, you're able to pay the mortgage, you're able to pay the rent, and you're able to do the basic things like you basically put a roof over your head and bring food into the house. If you can do that with money, if you're at that level there, you don't have a money problem. A money problem is when literally you don't know where the next meal is coming from or where your next bed is going to be. Does that make sense? So there's that kind of thing. Because if you've got money problems in the form of debt, there are so many ways to navigate, not navigate around debt, but manage it and get over it. There are ways of doing that. Now, I'm not a money expert, and that's not the scope of this particular podcast, but there are ways of navigating that. So the point I want to make is if your money is okay, your health is okay, and your relationships are okay, anywhere from okay to good, and you think you've got a problem, you don't have a problem. What you have is drama. So a lot of people don't have problems in their lives. They've got dramas in their life, unnecessary dramas. And the whole nature and world of drama deserves a whole nother podcast because that's beyond, it deserves a whole conversation. So now so this is the 4th level of uncertainty. So we've got the base level, which is really simple, variety. The next level that we have is the form of adventure, which is fun. And then it starts becoming more difficult. It takes a step up in the realm of challenge. Now, remember what I said before about inviting challenge into your life and the crucial importance of that. I'm going to circle back to that in a moment. Then the next level from there is where we got problems. Now, problems come to us. We don't go to it. A problem generally comes to us because of something that we've neglected or something that we've ignored or something that we've decided to not take responsibility for. Sounds harsh, but based on my experience of life, I believe is very accurate. And I've got more to say about that in a moment. If problems then, if we've got genuine problems where we've got a health, relationship, or money problem, is that when more than one of those three big things in life, money, health, relationships, are hit, we get to the fifth level, which is the most difficult level of uncertainty that we can face. And the fifth level of uncertainty is crisis, when we face a crisis point. If we've got a relationship issue and a money issue, like a genuine money problem and a genuine relationship problem, that's a crisis. You combine any of the three issues, whether we've got a health problem and a relationship problem, that's a crisis. If all three are being hit at the same time, that's a crisis. And these crisis points eventually change the person's life completely, but boy, oh boy, are they extremely difficult to navigate. Now, here's the thing I want to share. And this is it is the most crucial point I want to make in this particular episode. Let's circle back to challenge. If at the level of challenge, we bring in, so another level of challenge could be, right, as an example, is working out how to best feed our bodies, to educate ourselves in understanding why is it that our energy levels are low, why are our energy levels all over the place, what's something that I can do to resolve that. So educating ourselves in what works best for our bodies that's an example of challenge. Because I think changing the way, if you have to change the way you eat in order to align to whatever your body's needs are, that's not only a health challenge, that's actually an emotional challenge, a psychological challenge, it's a spiritual challenge, it's an emotional challenge, it's very healthy. So the point I want to make is at the level of challenge, we are very proactive in what we're looking to change in our lives. Now, problems and full-blown crisis points show up at our doorstep when we haven't consciously invited those challenges into our life. Because if I ignore my health problem or my energy problem, if I ignore the responsibilities of taking responsibility for my finances, if I ignore the attention and care that relationships need, then these things are going to become problems. Then if I keep ignoring and not taking responsibility for those problems, they'll blow into full-blown crises. Does that make sense? Guys, excuse me for a moment because I sneezed before this call and I need to just do this. Hold on a sec. Excuse me. I'm not going to edit that out. I like this to be real. That's better. So when I sneeze, I get a runny nose. Anyway, the point I want to make is that challenge becomes the pivotal point. And when you're experiencing a full-blown crisis, and I'm so happy to be wrong about this, I say this all the time, because so far in my life, I have found at the age of 55, I'm actually turning 56 by the time this recording goes out, is that I found that the more proactive I am in inviting challenge into my life, the challenge of starting a business, the challenge of running a business, the challenge of running marathons, the challenge of whatever challenge it is, the less likely or the more significantly reduced the probabilities are of experiencing full-blown problems and crisis points. Does that make sense? To give you an example of this, back in the 90s when I completed my psychology degree, I was lucky enough to land a job that was actually related to my career. And I got a job as a rehab counselor working at Ford Motor Company. The very short story of that is after 2.5 years of doing that job, it became obvious to me that the job that I had there was not for meaningful reasons. My role was I was fulfilling a role that was required by legislation. So in other words, my job officially or on paper was to help people get back to work, injured workers get back to work and help them navigate the emotions of that and getting back to work so they can be proactive members of the Ford Motor Company, which is where I was working, community, if that makes sense. Now, that's a really sweet way of putting it, but the reality was that I was fulfilling a legal obligation that Ford Motor Company had to have rehab counselors like me on site, because I also had insurers on site and all of the other legal requirements and political toxic agendas thrown in. This job became completely meaningless. Now, back then, I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that I needed to get out. And so as an interim, I went into the world of real estate sales because I didn't know what else to do with my career. And this is the point I want to make, is that was a courageous decision to enter a whole new world, to exit a world that was full of fire for me. And then when I went into the real estate world, which I stayed in for 7 years, and that changed my life and introduced me into the whole world of mentorship, coaching, personal development. I got introduced to the works of Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn, all these incredible thinkers and thought leaders of the time. Changed my life. And that eventually led me, down the track, to starting my own business. The point I want to make is that if I was not embracing the challenge of the pain that working at Ford Motor Company gave me, and decided to stay there because the money was fantastic. Now, in 1995, fresh out of uni, earning a $50,000 package, you're working, it's like the equivalent of earning $120,000 a year with all of the cost of living, straight out of uni right now. Straight out of uni. Like, I'm talking a week out of uni. Well, not a week. It was about a month out of uni. A month out of uni. Imagine doing that. Maybe those jobs exist. I don't know, but that's a whole other conversation. The point I want to make is that it was a courageous decision point. And to me, life is a handful of courageous decisions that in and of themselves are challenging. And it's by embracing that and navigating through that life doesn't have to come knocking at your doorstep to say, hey, here's a full-blown problem, here's a full-blown crisis. As a result of that, I got to escape the possibility. Escape's not the right word. I got to avoid, I don't know what the word is. I got to avoid the experience of a full-blown crisis because I proactively responded to the demands of my life. I hope that's making sense. So challenge, so we've got variety, adventure, challenge, problems, and crisis at the top. And the challenge one in the middle, that's the pivotal thing. You become a conscious inviter of uncertainty through various challenges that you bring into your life. As I said, whether those challenges are physical, mental, philosophical, relationship challenge, conversational challenge, whatever the challenge is that stretches the scope of your being, that helps you evolve, helps you expand your perception and understanding of life, of your life. Anything like that, life does not have a reason to come chasing after you. One of my favorite sayings in life is, we are either squeezing life or it is squeezing us. So I would rather be squeezing life rather than waiting for it to squeeze me. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Now, to add to this, there's a part 2 to this, which I might have to record a separate podcast for. The bit I wanted to add to this is your behavioral profile also has an impact on this. Your behavioral profile flavors how you navigate challenge. And I've decided organically, as I'm recording this, I'm going to record a part 2 to this podcast, and that'll be episode 116. So, look, I hope you found this particular model, this new model that I've created, these 5 levels of uncertainty, useful. I hope that this has really expanded and deepened your awareness of the importance, the crucial importance of bringing challenges into your life. Because the more healthier and consciously aware you are of the challenges you're bringing toward your heart, your soul, your mind, your spirit, your body, your everything, is that life doesn't have to come knocking with a problem or a crisis point. Am I wrong about that? I don't know. But so far in my 55 years of life or 56 years of life, this has been so true, so accurate. And every time I've coached a client who's in the middle of a crisis or a problem, I've seen patterns where they've avoided responsibility for something in the past, or they've ignored something in the past, or not taken care of crucial things in the past that have contributed to that particular problem or that full-blown crisis. So embracing challenge in your life is one of the most crucial levels of responsibility that you can take. And I hope you're really hearing this because that can make a massive difference. So if you want to boost your emotional fitness, embrace challenge, bring it into your life. It'll do you favors and create experiences in your life that we can't even possibly imagine before the challenge comes. So I hope this helps. Listen out to episode 116 that's coming after this, part 2, because in part 2, I'm going to talk about how our energetic signature and our behavioral profile impacts these 5 levels of uncertainty. All right. Hope you enjoyed. And if you're subscribed already, you'll keep getting notifications of these new episodes as they come out. And naturally, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. And if you can please comment away on insights and learnings from here, because that educates the algorithm to bring the right people to these messages, if this message, of course, resonates with you. And for those of you who've been with me over the years and continue to listen to this podcast, I really appreciate your support. It matters immensely. Thanks so much. See you soon. Bye for now. I trust you enjoyed this latest episode of the Insights Podcast and received great value. Please remember to subscribe and share your reviews, and I'll see you again very soon.